Hey, welcome back, Faithful Politics family. And if you're watching on our YouTube channel, we are happy to have you. Although you won't see a picture, Professor Butler, you'll just see like a little avatar. So, but she is behind the avatar. I promise.
She's behind the curtain.
Yeah,
I'm Oz this morning.
She is behind the curtain. So this week we have Dr. Anthea Butler. She is the professor of religion at the University of Pennsylvania and the author of Women in the Church of God in Christ, Making a Sanctified World. Also, she wrote The Rise of the Religious Right and White Evangelical Racism, The Politics of Morality in America. She's a leading historian, public commentator on religion and politics, and has appeared on networks including CNN, BBC, the History Channel, and MSNBC. Has published a number of pieces in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and many other media outlets. Professor Butler also serves as president of the American Society for Church History and is also a member of the American Academy of Religion, American Historical Association, and the International Communications Association. Historian of African American and American religion, Professor Butler's research and writing spans African American religion and history, race, politics, evangelicalism, gender and sexuality, media, and popular culture. So, welcome, Dr. Butler, for
Good morning.
being here.
How are you all doing?
That's an amazing introduction.
Yeah,
Thank you. I'm not Bryce Harper, but it'll work.
Yeah.
So I have to ask. So being from Pennsylvania, how do you feel about possibly having the crudité become your new state flower and the state
That's not
capital?
becoming our state flower. I gotta tell you that right now. I mean, come on. Let's just start here. Let's start with Dr. Oz, because I must admit that even if you're a Republican, you don't want this man. I mean, you don't want him. He's been on Oprah. He's a rhino. I mean, if I were John Fetterman, I'd be saying he was a rhino right now. I'd be telling everybody he was a rhino. He has how many houses? 7 houses, 9 houses. He's not the real deal. And he didn't even know what a crudité is anyway. He's shopping in the store. You can tell he didn't even know what to do in the grocery store. You have a basket. That man does not shop. He doesn't do anything like normal people do. So let's dispense with this notion right now that anybody really wants Dr. Oz. Nobody wants him. Nobody wants him. He's over. He's overplayed. I don't know why he just goes sit back over there in Jersey and do whatever it is he does in Jersey.
Yeah. I mean, everything's legal in Jersey. So I don't know why he
Pretty
wouldn't
much.
do that. I guess on a more serious note, we're going to talk a lot about your book, White Evangelical Racism, in this conversation. And for starters, I have to say that is a great book. It's a wonderful read, and I think I've learned more in that book about religion in America, and especially how it ties into slavery and sort of the African American story here in America, more than any other book. So I mean, if that's not a plug, I don't really know what is. But I'm curious about why did you choose to write White Evangelical Racism?
Honestly, 2 reasons. One is I had a great editor who said, you should take this op-ed and make it into a book. And she's right. And the second reason was, there's twofold for number 2. One is I got tired of people asking about why white people love Donald Trump. And especially evangelicals love Donald Trump. So that was one. But the other was I realized there was a longer history to tell. And I was just annoyed with people like Michael Gerson and others who kept wringing their hands like, I don't understand why, evangelicals like Donald Trump. And, this can't be happening to us. It was really annoying to me. And I hate whining. And so the tone of the book is not whining, as you can see. And if you read it. And also, I think that it was time to sort of say some things about evangelicalism that evangelicals don't want to say about themselves, right? They know it, but they don't want to say it. And I know evangelicals. I went to Evangelical Seminary. I went to Evangelical Church for a time. I know them. I know my people. And I still say that they're my people, even though they have gone, this other way, right? Because there's many of them that are still my friends. But I think that it's important to call a thing a thing. Mm-hmm. And this was a thing.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Part of the book that I forgot to mention was it's one of those books where I downloaded it on my Kindle, and it's like every other paragraph I'm highlighting something. So kind of in preparation for this interview, I'm going through all my notes, and I'm like, the entire book is practically highlighted. Like, I don't even know like what parts, like that I'm really, really interested in. So, so just well done on a book. And I think Josh has a question for you.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dr. Butler. It's really amazing to be able to interview you and talk with you about this really important book. So thank you for writing it. Thank you for being willing to talk about it. And thanks for your attitude of taking things on head on and not skating around the issues. It's really nice when people are candid, but candid in a gracious way. So thank you for all of that. You talk about evangelicalism in the book. My question is, what is evangelicalism? What's the definition of an evangelical for purposes of your book?
When I wrote the book, I had a definition, but now I'm going to tell you that I would go off of that definition. I would say Republican, and because let me say this:
so evangelical Republicans.
Yeah, I would just say this is Republican, evangelical Republican. I mean, I don't mean that to be flip. What I mean by that is that evangelicalism has had kind of this sort of a morphing, if you will. It's been like a cartoon character, right? Except this is not. Maybe this is like more like the Hulk. There's this nice, mild-mannered person who's evangelical, who wants Jesus to come back and wants to spread the gospel throughout the world and believes in the quadrilateral and all of that stuff. And then they turned into this big, giant moral monster, stomping all over everybody, even though they're not very big, in numbers. They're big in outsized imagination of the press, especially, and politicians. And now we're dealing with a monster. And I don't know how the monster gets back in the box. I hate to call evangelicalism a monster because I don't mean it like that. But what I do mean is that evangelicals today are not the evangelicals of the 19th century. They're not even the evangelicals of the mid-20th century. They are something else altogether. And they have become part and parcel of a political party, Republicans, that, knew that they could exploit them. But at the same time, evangelicals also knew that they wanted power. And so that's how this marriage has come about.
That's so fascinating. So you had mentioned, even now that they're in your book and on this interview already, that evangelicals are your people. Mm-hmm. And that's I love that. I love that phraseology. What shifted where you maybe no longer call yourself or would associate yourself with evangelical, though you may have used to?
Oh, that's a good point. I haven't associated myself with evangelicalism, in language and in person for probably, I would say, at least 18 years, if not 20. And the reason why for that is because I was baptized and raised Catholic. I think I could talk about this on the podcast. I don't really say this in the book, but I went back to the
Catholic. Can talk about anything on the podcast.
Yeah, well, yeah, I figured. I went back to the Catholic Church in part not because I thought the Catholic Church was any better, but it was a better intellectual home for me. And that's a long story that maybe I'll write about sometime. But, by the time that I was done, really done with my PhD work and going back to teach, I just decided that I needed to identify as Catholic because it was easier to talk about stuff. I think the reason why I say evangelicals are my people is because A, I know so many, and B, I know them. I mean, and it's like, I think that you'll realize, Josh, and I'll be interested to hear what you think about the book, because you can't write that book without knowing evangelicals. I mean, you can know that history, but there's nuances to history that only evangelicals would know, right? And so if you know the nuances, you know how to push that button, right? And I'm thinking that I'm pushing buttons all through this because I know them.
Interesting. So when you say that, you kind of equate the definition of evangelical with, being a Republican. Like not all Republicans are evangelical. Like
No.
like Rick Wilson, who is like a avid, anti-Trumper.
Why is he still Republican? Why is he still Republican? I mean, it's a good question. I mean, like, I don't think he should still be Republican. I mean, it's very clear you don't believe this anymore. But I think the question you're asking is an important one. And here's why. I think that Republicans have taken on this moral code. They're better than evangelicals they are themselves. And so this morality that they use as talking points and pillars of their, plans, whether that's fiscal or whatever, it's very clear. The other thing I think I'll bring up, which you didn't bring up, but I'll bring it up, is this piece that just came out a couple of days ago where I don't remember if it was Gerson or somebody else, I should remember this, who said, I finally realized that racism was part of the Republican Party. And I was like, really? No shit. How about that? I mean, how are you this dense to not understand that race is a pillar of, the Republican Party? It's just like, I didn't think it was like this big thing, and all of a sudden I realized it was. And it's just, Bill Kristol, same thing. So we're talking politics, let's talk politics, okay? So these guys who are like political commentators are going to tell me that they didn't realize that this was about race when you had, so many things. Reagan starting off his campaign in Philadelphia, Mississippi, where Schwarter, Cheney, and Goodman were killed, outside of there. You're going to tell me you don't understand that it's about racism when, they called Barack Obama and did all these, Tea Party crazy things. You're going to tell me it's not about racism to make him show his birth certificate. And I could just go on for an hour to talk about all of this stuff. So this is the kind of disingenuous kind of behavior that I have come to equate with Republicans and also evangelicals. So this is a lockstep march. This is about politics. It's about power. It's about authoritarianism. And I think that we can't afford to sit around and do the navel gazing kind of stuff where people talk about theology as a way to align the social issues that are going on with evangelicals and Republicans.
Yeah, because in your book, and I have a quote. This is one of the many highlighted things I had in your book, where you wrote, the ubiquitous support demonstrated by white evangelicals for the Republican Party made them not just religiously or culturally white, it made them politically white conservatives in America concerned with keeping the status quo, patriarchy, cultural hegemony, and nationalism. And I'm curious if you had any thoughts about like when did the shift occur? Like where, the party that would ultimately, try to keep slavery from pushing further west, became a party that behaves much like the Democrats of the 1860s.
This is what I'm going to tell you, that you have to do your history now, and you have to go back and look at things that are happening in 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, 20th century, right? To see this shift from the Dixiecrats to when you get to 1964, and to talk about the Republican Party then, and even know, that is a huge loss, right? Big loss for Republicans in 64 against, LBJ. I mean, I think all of that really sticks. And that is where I see this major shift beginning in 64, where we're thinking about, prayer not being in schools anymore. We're thinking about Barry Goldwater talking about certain kinds of ways in which he's going to fight. The next year you get ministers and marches from, Jerry Falwell. We need to talk about Falwell before we leave today for a certain reason. I'll tell you in a minute. I think it's really interesting that, this is the thing that comes up for Republicans all the time. Well, we were the party that didn't want slavery. We didn't want this. It's like, but no. You got to deal with who you are now. You have this history. This is true. But that's the only thing you have to sit down on. Then you turned into these other people. Then you out Dixiecrat the Dixiecrats. and so this is what people won't say, right? And they're just like, well, but this is who they were. And they want free markets, and they want, limited government. Well, how do you want limited government when you're taking books out of the schools? How do you want limited government when you tell women that they can't have an abortion? Well, how do you want? I mean, this is a conundrum. Nobody ever comes back on them to argue these points. And this is where I think Democrats have just become like, basically worthless in a way. I mean, I'm frustrated with both parties. You need to hear this right now from me. I'm very frustrated because I see on both, I'm not doing the both sides-ism, but each party has some serious problems right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's
That makes
true.
a lot of sense.
Democrats are notoriously bad at politics. And I'm a Democrat, right? So
Horrible.
I always say that they're really good at snatching, defeat out of the jaws of victory. Because
I'm
they're
about to
just
do it again.
yeah. We need our own Mitch McConnell. I hate to
Oh,
say
we don't
it,
have
but
one. We've never had
uh,
one. That's the Democrats have never had Mitch McConnell. They've never had, a Walsingham, if you know British history. They've never had somebody who just cover your back and just be like, I'm gonna stab everybody for you, okay? And I'm gonna take the hit and I'm gonna kill everybody, but I'm gonna clear the way for you. And that's not Democrats. It's just not Democrats at all. The other thing that Democrats don't have is this sort of, the liberalism makes you not want to have a religious core. So I want to go back to something. Now I'm going to take you all in the weeds because I remember all these things. I think this is worth it for the book. There was this interesting debate thing back, it was 2007, 2008, where CNN did this whole thing about faith, and they had, Barack Obama on, they had Hillary Clinton. All these people could talk about their faith, right? It was really interesting. But you don't see them doing anything like this anymore. They don't care. Nobody hardly ever knew that Hillary Clinton was a Methodist. Nobody talked about that. They just knew she was that evil woman that was married to Bill Clinton who cheated, right? So you don't remember all of these things about the Democratic Party that you should know. You don't think about, rolling out people in a certain way. Let's give it a slice. I don't know when this is going to air, but between Herschel Walker and, Raphael Warnock. I mean, Herschel Walker, y'all, okay, like this is so much wrong here. But you got a black preacher he has a PhD from Union Seminary, who is the pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church, the historical MLK church, but yet Republicans think that Herschel Walker is better, who didn't pay child support, who put a gun to a woman's head, who paid for an abortion, but he's forgiven. I mean, this is like Donald Trump. This is the black Donald Trump, except he don't even have the money. And Donald Trump doesn't have the money either, so maybe they are on par.
He has a police badge, right?
He has a police badge. He looks like a cartoon. This is a cartoon. It's just ridiculous. It's so embarrassing.
That's so amazing. I'm just trying to even think of where to go at this point.
I know. Josh is like, what?
No, I absolutely love it. Actually, a question that came to my mind that I really wanted to get your insight in, Dr. Butler, is so how come the Democrats, after everything with Barack Obama and the progress, how come they put up Joe Biden, a really old, rich white guy?
They didn't have anybody else. I mean, listen, I was on Catholics for Biden. Fine, I did my part. Could you ask me to do it again for 2024? No. Because I think it's time for President Biden to get out of the way and let somebody else do this stuff. We have a big problem. That is, we have too many people who are at the age where they should be enjoying their retirement instead of being in power. And it's slowing down the nation, and it's making us look like a bunch of crazy people, honestly. And that's part of it. I hate to say it, I'm not ageist, but what I do think is that we have to understand that there's a moment in which people need to sit down. Now, why didn't the Democratic Party put anybody else up? It is very simple. They don't want liberals. See, the thing you have to understand about the Democratic Party is that they don't really want what they say they want, okay? They're kind of more like moderate Republicans. And so you understand that, then you understand the problem that the Democratic Party is facing, especially with younger people. They don't care. Like next week, in order to try to get out the vote here in Pennsylvania, who are they bringing in? Barack Obama. And somebody said it succinctly on Twitter this morning. Nobody cares about Barack Obama that's under 35 years of age. Those are the people you need to get to the polls. They don't care. I mean, he's a historical figure to them. He's not, and it's true. It's 8 years down the pike. Nobody cares. They don't care. They were young. They didn't have to vote. They were just like, oh, nice looking president. They've lived under Trump. They need somebody who can fight. And they don't have anybody to bring here that can fight. So, this is where it becomes really problematic for Democrats because they don't have this space. Republicans have Charlie Kirk training young little, foot soldiers to go out into the world and stomp everybody. And that's the difference. You go to a Republican thing, it's like this girls in sheath dresses. It's nice. You can get a date no matter who you want to be with. Okay, let me be clear. And then, it's got youthfulness, it's got excitement, it's got energy. They're not putting old people out on these events. But here we are in the Democratic Party. We don't have anybody that could even go out and look like, the hip. And I don't mean this to be just about looks, but it really is about attitude.
Yeah. Culture.
Mm-hmm.
You're saying, what I hear you saying is they're out of touch with the youth culture, which seems like a shift from what it used to be, when like Bill Clinton came on MTV or whatever.
Yeah, it was on Arsenio Hall with amazing. The saxophone. Yeah. Yeah. You see, as a historian, I remember these things.
Yeah. And they wanted Gen X, you know what I mean? They wanted Gen X and millennials, and it's interesting to hear your interpretation and your perspective on this. It's really fascinating to me.
Dianne Feinstein is all I have to say to you. I mean, it's terrible, but we got, y'all got Chuck Grassley. We got Dianne. I mean, it's like people, this is my parents. No.
No doubt.
No. This is not engender excitement in a party.
No, I totally
like in 2016 when like Bernie Sanders was getting the majority of the young vote. I was like, I mean, and for better for worse, I was a Bernie bro. Like I was like, hey, okay, he's saying the things I like, but I'm like, but dude, that guy is old.
Yeah, but Daddy Bernie had you know what the thing is, and I'm calling him Daddy Bernie because that's what Cardi
Daddy Bernie.
She was right. And she called him Daddy Bernie because she knew that would make him A, sexy to people, but B, also, it was like this weird combination of the old dude who was sexy, but he's also talking about some stuff so that you could get paid. So, it worked, right? But Bernie had something to say. And that's why you had so many, it might have been the old, grumpy grandpa standing in front of you, but that old grumpy grandpa understood that you weren't making that much as a barista. And then you needed to pay your rent. Nancy don't understand that. Nancy Pelosi does not understand that. Her husband is like driving around, and he could have somebody drive him, but he chose to drive, and now look what happened to him. Okay, but I'll be nice today and not talk about his DUI. Oops, did I say it? But
yes, you did.
I did say it. And her stock options. I mean, listen. I mean, this is gonna be a confusing show for your people on both sides because they're like, wait a minute.
Wait, what does she actually think?
Huh? Yeah, you actually have to.
Who does she like?
You actually have to think because you got to realize that I'm gonna say like Malcolm X, you've been hoodwinked, you've been bamboozled by both parties.
Yes,
and this is a problem.
Yes.
I could write the same book about Democrats and talk about the relationship with Democrats and religion, and tear all this stuff up. It just happened to be about evangelicals because that has been the thing that has been in the news. They have sucked out of the air out of the media space. So I think that we're faced with a much bigger challenge right now, which is fascism and authoritarianism, which is coming. It's pretty much here in some states already. And that becomes, to me, a more major issue. The Republicans know how to harness that. Democrats don't even know what to do in the face of it, except whine and cry and run from behind.
Dude, I love your analysis. So talk to me about what do you think it is about the Republican Party? Like, how have they bamboozled, in your words? So if they've bamboozled white evangelicals, how have they done it? What's happened?
Look, can we start my favorite person, Ronald Reagan?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
I mean,
start with Reagan.
You can't endorse me, but I endorse you. Oh, look how lovely that was. It was already like, you're the girlfriend that I can't bring out in public, but I'll come and meet you in private, right? And so they were like, okay, you're handsome, you're a movie star. We will totally be treated like this by you, and just hope that you will invite us to the big house sometimes, at White House. Just invite us a couple of times. You got the moral majority in all of this. So it made it a lot easier for Republicans to do this thing. And then you have the talking points. I mean, think about it for a minute. I'm going to use the person that always comes up in my mind as the evangelical president, and that's George Bush Jr., the little shrub, as what's his name called him. The interesting thing about George W. Bush is that he was like a really evangelical person. He wanted compassionate conservatism. Now, they did all the dirty stuff underneath, and I talk about that in the book. But I think one of the important things to say is that how is it that like a George W. Bush, who got us through 9/11 and all of this other stuff, becomes ancillary to a character like Trump, who just basically is a transactional president, who gives evangelicals their 3 judges and on the Supreme Court and over 200 judges across the nation, who does photo ops with them, has Paula White, who's not even really an evangelical, but like a prophetess preacher of Pentecostalism, and the D list of all these leaders that he's brought in, right? Yes, I see Josh going down there. Yeah, I know, right? I mean, it's insulting to evangelical who's like really steeped in theology to have these folks around this guy, right? It
is.
And so you want to spend all this time on theology. People don't care about theology. They don't care about that. And so,
care about propaganda.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what Trump did. He did evangelical propaganda. And so, one of the more difficult things that I've said about evangelicals, I think that everybody's just looking at me right now because they don't know how to respond to, is that evangelicals are Pentecostals now. You're not evangelicals anymore. And so these evangelicals who say to be represented to you in public, like the Charlie Kirks and the General Mike Flynn's and all these people out here, they're into spiritual warfare. They're into all this other stuff that evangelicals would have never talked about from their pulpits. But they get labeled evangelical too now. And so this is what you're dealing with, is like Republicans have embraced this kind of evangelicalism rather than the Calvin kind of evangelicalism that has like the heavy theology and, thinking and all of that stuff. And now you're faced with this dilemma because you're being dragged into the morass by, Trumpism, basically. And the only thing that might save you all is Ron DeSantis. But if you take Ron DeSantis, then you're going to go into full-on authoritarianism, and he's going to be wearing those white boots every day in the White House.
Yeah, it's true. And it's weird, or maybe not weird, but expected that, I consider myself a Christian. I'm a believer, and but I also identify as liberal, so, check all the boxes, for all the liberal causes, most of them anyways. And, I struggle, or I shouldn't, I wonder how people perceive my level of faith when all they see is the propaganda, like I'm not necessarily out there in a pulpit, telling, people in the LGBTQ community, they're all going to hell, because like, I just don't really care. I just love them, like, just like I hope they love me, and I don't spend a lot of time dwelling about that kind of stuff. But it seems like the religious right seem to kind of put a lot of focus on, sort of what they perceive as these moral sins, and then use that as sort of the stepping off point to launch a campaign, and I'm curious on what you think about that, and also, what you think about, having folks on, the left that are also evangelicals or are believers, kind of working in this political space.
Okay, so let me start with the first thing about morality. One of the most important things about my book is not the first part of the title, but the last part of the title, The Politics of Morality in America. Morality is now politics. Morality is not something that you do or behave. It is a political strategy. And so I think one of the biggest things you have to realize about Republicans right now is that they've used morality as a political strategy. Evangelicals were trying to use morality as a way to talk about themselves, but they got caught up in the political strategy rather than the strategy of this is how God wants us to live. Now they're like, this is how we want everybody to live. We don't give a damn whether you like God or not. This is how you all should live. And this is how we're going to gain control over you. So this is the problem. The problem is this morality that does not flow out of Christian beliefs or ideals. It is morality that flows out of power and authoritarianism and the need to win. And this is what you see in the 2022 election cycle. This is why everybody is calling, Democrats demons and all of the rest of this other stuff, right? So once you realize that, then it's a lot easier to grasp what's going on. Now, you're talking about evangelicals who are liberal like yourself, who are in the political realm. They don't know what to do because what this has done, what has happened for Republicans and evangelicals has made them wary of talking about their faith. Because if they talk about their faith, they're seen to be like these people, right? And so they end up soft pedaling everything it is they believe. They don't lean on what I would call like red letter Christians say, that, red letter of the scripture in the New Testament, right? They don't go by Jesus's words. They're just kind of saying like, well, it's all going to be nice. We love each other. We don't have anything against LGBTQ people. We believe that a woman should have a right to choose, but it's all wishy-washy because it doesn't sound like it comes from a moral foundation at all. So that's how they get you. One side makes their morality sound like it's very much steeped in what God wants. The other side is like ashamed of saying that this might be what God wants instead of what that other God wants. And they won't say it like that. And so I think this is where we're left with these kinds of, base, ways of thinking about religion, right? And thinking about what people actually believe. Because I guarantee you, if an evangelical woman who really believes in life ends up with an ectopic pregnancy, she's going to want to go to the hospital. If she's got a decent husband, he's going to take her to the hospital. She might be caught up in a state where she can't do anything, but she's going to drive. And we just had a case like this in Texas happen. So, do you want to die? This is what gets me. It's like half of these people don't even understand how bodies work, let alone, but yet you're making rules. And so you're making rules that make no sense when, you end up being Herschel Walker and you're paying for abortions anyway.
Yeah. And I have a friend who is a service member and they go out to sea a lot. So I saw him recently. He came over. We're pretty good friends with their family and their kids and stuff. And but he's staunch, like he's right of Josh, super pro Trump, all this other kind of stuff. And we got to talking about books, and I said, hey, what kind of books are you reading? He kind of told me, and he asked what kind of books I'm reading. I said, well, I'm reading this book about white evangelical racism, and he's just like,
yes, I'm basically the Antichrist. I know.
and I was like, no, like it's not what you think, I don't think, like, and he's like, well, that's the thing, like all of a sudden, like, and my friend's white, and he's like, people out there just want like, white people to feel bad about stuff. And I was like, if you feel bad after reading this book, like I think that there's a character issue there, because I think the book is written for a pretty wide audience. And so then I started to dissect some parts out of your book that I found interesting. And I said, like, what do you know about the Negro Bible? And he's like, what do you mean? I was like, well, there's a pretty big section in there about what the Negro Bible is and the effect it had on sort of like people's faith, so we started to kind of unpack that. And, I don't think I necessarily, convinced him otherwise to read your book, but I'm curious if you can maybe expand on, one, like, what is the Negro Bible, sort of its origins, and how was it kind of used to, pervert the gospel or scripture or promote slavery?
Basically, you take all the things out about liberation. You take all those parts about, you don't put in there, how God freed the Israelites from slavery. You don't talk about, things like whoever is made free in the Son is made free indeed. You make sure that Bible talks about slavery. And that those are the kinds of scriptures that you let people hear, right? And what you have to understand is like, this Bible isn't going to slaves. They don't know how to read to begin with. There's a few people who do, but, let's talk about the fact that you don't want them to read, right? You don't want people to read because they would find out about their own liberation. They would find out that God doesn't want them to be enslaved. So you don't want them to read in the first place, but you want to use a Bible that says those things. And I would submit that that's part of to make you feel better about what you're doing. So let me expand this out because you're going to talk about this Bible, but I just want to use that Bible as a foundation for the other stuff that happens. How do you, Josh, what denomination do you consider yourself? Are you not in a church or, in a denomination or what?
I'm non-denominational, currently,
okay.
But I was in the Assemblies of God and consider myself, I lean Pentecostal. For
Okay,
sure,
all right,
theology.
that's good. That gives me a place. It gives me a place to put you because the assemblies have their own kind of weird history anyway. So let's think about it. If you came out of Southern Baptist tradition, the first thing you have to grapple with is the Southern Baptist, and this is why I can't understand why Black people are in the Southern Baptist Convention. You are a denomination that was created because you wanted slaves. You wanted to have slavery. You didn't want to be with the Northern Baptists who were saying slavery is wrong. So you have to, think about your origins. Same thing with PCA, right? If you're in Presbyterian Church of America, you have to interrogate your origins. So this is not, as your friend would say about making somebody feel bad about themselves, it's making you have to listen to what this history is, okay? And so history sometimes is not kind to the people that you like or the people that you associate with or the people you have a heritage from, right? And you have to think about what does that mean about how things are planned or spinning out denominationally today. I just saw this really interesting statistic on Twitter yesterday by Ryan Burge about how many seminaries have over, I don't know, maybe over 300 or 500 students. They are all Baptists, and most of them are Southern Baptists, okay? And so I thought this is very interesting. The Southern Baptists are training the bulk of pastors in theological education right now. It's not liberal seminaries. It's not non-denominational seminaries. It's Baptists. Okay. So that tells me a lot right there. It's not even the people who think about theology in these really kind of heavy ways like Calvin, seminary and all this kind of stuff. So that in and of itself tells me something about where we're going to go politically. It's always going to be more to the right than it is to the middle or the left. That's one. The second thing I think we have to also think about here is what does this history tell us? This history tells us that maybe, I don't want to predict this, but I think that these pressures are mounting about race and all this. And the way that they're mounting is because of people who don't have religious affiliation being tired of being told what to do by people who do have a religious affiliation. Okay. So I think that what we're faced with here in America right now is this dissonance that has increased since Barack Obama became president, right? And the kind of pushback that everything had. We are in a very difficult time. The other thing that's very difficult about this time is that you have a media apparatus that has changed everything. And we have not talked about 1/6, and I can't believe that. But, how many nice little Christian men and pastors went over there to go storm the Capitol and defecate all over the place and try to kill people in a frenzy for a president that didn't give a shit about them. Excuse me, I'm going to cuss on your show, but this is the way it is. And, I think about this and I think this is what you all want. You want this guy? You want this kind of a thing for yourself and your children because you think it's going to make you safe? It's all about fear. It's about fear of being lost, fear of being the other, fear of not having power, fear of white men not having power. The normal kind of thing. The New York Times just had a thing yesterday. We're losing our country. Well, hell, I believe it was the Native Americans' country before we all ever got here. However we got here. Some of us came on a boat. Some of us came by indentured servitude. Other of us came at the bottom of the ship, and half of our people got thrown in the ocean, and we'll never know who they are. Right?
Yeah, it's so sad.
So I mean, this is the craziness of this thing, of people saying, this is my country, when it's like, no, it's not. No, it's not. It never was your country.
I just feel like that's such a profound statement to let, for us to let settle in, that it reminds me of, my own interpretation of things like Genesis 1:26 through 28, where men and women are made in the image of God and given stewardship, not ownership, over the world. And owners treat their things however they want, but stewards treat them with care. And we just thought we were owners, and that's been one of the issues, right, that we've had for so long, is our lack of stewardship for the things that, and humility. It's fascinating thinking about the history of the Bible, and the history of biblical interpretation in America. And obviously we know that the Bible was used to liberate, and it was used to enslave. And my question as we're as I'm thinking about this is, so you're a historian and understand historical method. Walk us through how how the Bible was used at that time,
Yeah.
and the evil ways in which it was used, and how are we to understand, even how are we to put on like an objective hat to look at history, like you said, like the whole of history, not just a part of it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The whole of it.
Let me give you an example. I'll start with this because I think it's a really good thing. There's two Genesis stories, right? You don't think anything about that. You just say, okay, there's two ways to tell this story about Genesis. Right. In the 19th century, actually even further back, 18th century, there were people who believed in polygenesis, two creations. So they believed that the first creation was kind of an aberration. So, and if we had this on right now, and I don't have it here in front of me, there's a book that was printed in 1900 by Charles Carroll called The Negro, a Beast. It has a picture of a black man on the front with ape-like characteristics. Polygenesis, and this is what this book, The Negro, the Beast, was about this man believing, and others too, believing that there were two different creations, and that black people were an aberration creation. They were not this perfect creation. And so there's a picture in the book of Adam and Eve sort of standing in the garden, kind of covered up, naked, looking up at the light of God coming from heaven. And then in the corner, they have this picture, this very bestial picture of a black man. And saying, could God have created both of these? So in other words, this was a mistake. So you're asking a question about how do people interpret the Bible. Back then, that's how people interpret the Bible, okay? And so they don't have biblical higher criticism that starts in the middle of the 19th century with Germans and all of this. They don't have that. They're just going like, this must be where black people came from. Oh, this is how the curse of Cain happened. If there's another way you could talk about this, the curse of, Ham, Shepard, David, curse of Ham, basically, whatever. Cain is also another way they do it. So Cain killed his brother. That means he was cursed. He was black, right? Or you could have Ham looking on his father's nakedness. Anybody who was a descendant of Ham was enslaved. Oh, they just happen to all be black. Look at that. Okay, So there's these different ways in which people use scripture to do that. So fast forward, 20th century, you have people who, you got Standard Oil who pays for the fundamentals and has all these things about how to refute higher biblical criticism in the 19th century that the Germans have already started. All right, you get a nice little biblical history lesson here that I can do. Lots of people can't do this. And this is where you begin to have all of this kind of theological stuff that happens and the kinds of breakups that happen when, Princeton Seminary goes into Westminster Seminary. You get the creation of Fuller Seminary and how you're going to do Bible and how you're going to talk about that and how evangelicals sort of think about this. Now what you've got, and this is the unfortunate part, is that you have some of this stuff going on where you have people who are really looking at scriptures and all this, but then you got somebody like a John MacArthur that really believes like 19th century stuff and is basically believes in biblical racism. He claims to be this guy in Southern California who knows so much stuff, and I'm bringing up his name for a reason. But he also believes in 19th century crap. That is not proven. It's not scholarship about scripture because he thinks it justifies whiteness over everything else. Let's not even get into the missionary activity and everything, because I could go on for hours with this. But all of this to say is that this moment that we're in 2022, you're lucky if anybody even uses the Bible to support their racial stuff. They don't. It just falls into this sort of ether. So I'll give a story. I usually don't talk about my students and I won't name the class, but I had a class recently in which one of my students said, we talked about this. And he said, oh yeah, my grandmother believes this right now. My grandmother believes that black people were another creation. And I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, she talks about this all the time. She says black people are really like human.
I've never heard that.
I just throw my hands up out. I was like, I was like, there's nothing else up for me to say. Let me just leave. Give me your grandma's telephone number.
Wow, that yeah, I've never heard that before either, but it's not surprising. I
No,
mean,
no,
a
not
lot
at
of
all.
people a lot of people have a hard time believing racism is still even a thing today.
Yeah.
But it's alive and well, and I want to ask you about a particular person you mentioned in your book by the name of Paul Weyrich, and you quoted him by saying, "I don't want everybody to vote. Elections are not won by a majority of people. They never have been from the beginning of our country, and they are not now. As a matter of fact, our leverage in the elections quite candidly goes up as the voting populace goes down." And you point out that this was actually in 1980.
Mhm.
So who's Paul Weyrich?
Paul Weyrich was a great organizer. And I say that because I call him an organizer first before I call him what he really was, also Catholic. Okay. So this is the beginning of how everything sort of comes together. Paul Weyrich was a political activist kind of person. I'm forgetting, I believe it's not, it's part of it, he's been founder of Heritage, I believe. So part of all of this was his political action and activity helped Republicans to come together. I mean, he was very much somebody who wanted to do, I'm going to steal the title of Focus on the Family and say this. He really wanted the Republicans to focus in on family issues and family values. And that's how he gets a lot of political power and becomes part of the Reagan administration, you know, a successful kind of person who really sets down the tone for all of this that happens politically in the 80s and the 90s. And so we have to think about, there's these figures that are on the outside, right, who are using all of this stuff like Reagan and everybody else, and the way he talks about, you know, city on a hill and everything. But for every person that does that, there's a Paul Weyrich kind of type in the background that is really important in terms of how we think about conservatives and religion. And I think he's somebody who deserves a book on his own, really, in a way, to kind of really unpack all the things he's doing. I just mentioned him kind of in passing, but if you want to think about sort of I don't want to call it theology, but to think about people who fall into space, you know, it's a Paul Weyrich, it's, you know, believe it or not, a Pat Robertson. It's these kind of people who organize things. When Pat Robertson creates Christian Coalition, that is a big moment. Ralph Reed helps him. You have to think about the people who are doing this. If we want to talk about the present day Ralph Reeds, then we could think about, you know, believe it or not, even though I don't think he should get it on the intellectual basis alone, Charlie Kirk, you know, the guy who's running Reawakening Clay. These kinds of folks are doing mobilization efforts within these communities that nobody pays attention to, except if you have to live in Pennsylvania, you do, because they were just here this weekend. These are the kind of people who are organizing these groups, who are getting these folks out to the polls. And so I think it's really important. You tend to look at somebody like a Franklin Graham and say, okay, Franklin Graham is it. No, he's not. Franklin Graham's kind of like a figurehead, but the real power lies in the people who are able to mobilize and bring folks together in these kinds of meetings, and in the ways in which they will become the foot soldiers to do the stuff and the kind of voting that Republicans need.
Yeah, that's a powerful analysis. If could you drive a line or draw a line for us, moving from, like, one of the things you talk about in your book, even just read around that idea of Paul Weyrich. Mm-hmm. You have him described as one of the four pillars of conservatism, alongside William F. Buckley, Barry Goldwater, mm-hmm. and Ronald Reagan. How draw us a line from those guys to the Christian nationalism?
How much more time do we have
facing today?
Yeah, I mean,
well, whatever time you have to explain it.
I just I'm joking, because I'm just saying this because I'm like, this is a hard one. But I think, you know, honestly, if you're going to think about Christian nationalism, I'm going to really challenge everybody's thinking and say, let's go back to Billy Graham. Because Billy Graham really is a proponent of all of this. Even though he's sitting in the 1950s, he's fighting communism. But this is the moment, you know, that we begin to put this God and country thing. The God and country thing has always been there. But if you want to think about who the four pillars of Christian nationalism are right now, I would say David Barton definitely is one of them, because he's made up this fake history, right? This terrible fake history about America that is not really historical and doesn't exist, but makes America seem like it's a Christian nation. I would say the other pillar, of course, is Donald Trump, because of the way he's done that. I would say the third pillar is a nebulous pillar, but I think it's a really important one. It's the groups like the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers and all of those folks who are out there, doing the sort of violent part of this. And then the fourth piece really is actually the Republican Party that is starting to embrace this term. And so you've got people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and others who are really pushing this as a way to sort of think about themselves, because they see it as a rebrand. This is one of the things that they do very effectively, is to take a word or a term that doesn't mean what they think it means and rebrand it into something they want it to mean. And so, people like that, Marjorie Taylor Greene or Laura Boebert or others, I mean, you could even go back and say Palin's part of this. Sarah Palin was really good about this. Real Americans, right? That's a nationalistic kind of statement. She tried to make Barack Obama not be a real American, right? And, of course, back then you had a John McCain who was not into this at all and didn't like that kind of language, but he was stuck with her as a running mate. So you got this kind of thing that's going on right now that's really building Christian nationalism. And the reason why we talk about Christian nationalism is, one, that it's become very pervasive. And then second, people get upset with us when we say white Christian nationalism, but you have to put the white in front of it, because a lot of it has to do with white supremacy and wanting to keep white men in power. So you have to do that. But, as I always say, there are lots of people of color who believe in Christian nationalism. They believe that God has made this country for a particular purpose. And so when you hear somebody like General Flynn say, this is meant to be a Christian nation, there's a lot of people who can get on board on that of lots of different, stripes. They don't really see anything wrong with that statement. But that flies in the face of everything that the founders and framers wanted for this country, which was about religious freedom.
Yeah, it doesn't help that the Family Research Council recently hosted like a discussion about Christian nationalism, and I watched a part of it, and
that was all you could stand.
Oh my goodness! I mean, like I got lost when a person was up there and he started to talk about intersectionality. Like
I didn't know what you're talking about.
I was like,
I mean, they like to say intersectionality and critical race theory, and I'm like, y'all don't know what this is. Please, just say woke, because that's the only word. I mean, it's 4 letters. It's easy for you to say. Don't go past where you can go past.
That's and on the topic of CRT, so we did a whole series on critical race theory. We talked to a couple professors that teach it at Berkeley and Yale, and I learned a lot. And then we talked to a gentleman, James Lindsay, who was sort of giving us kind of the other side, if you will, like of the argument. And one of the common terms I heard a lot from the professors anyways was this idea of like dog whistles. And I know in your book that you mentioned that states' rights is a dog whistle for the GOP. Specifically, I think you applied it to the Southern strategy. But I'm curious if you have any other thoughts, or if there's any other application of that, say, especially in context of the Dobbs decision.
Dog whistle is very not a term we should use now. Okay. You know why? Because it's basically like a bullhorn. It's not a dog whistle anymore. Dog whistle is something that only dogs can hear, but like everybody can hear everything now. So it's not a dog whistle anymore. All right. Dobbs, I mean, listen, the day that everything happened and it went down, before there's 2 moments. The first moment was back in May when they released the draft. And then the second moment was June. And I said, dude, this has been the long con. This has been coming for 50 years plus. Why are you tripping? You knew this was coming, but you didn't, you all didn't think it was going to happen. But states had already basically put Dobbs into effect. Dobbs just gave them what they needed to do the kinds of things that were already happening in places like Texas. Okay. So this is one of those moments where I just, I had to look and just say, I see all these people being upset. The Democrats think they can run on it this fall, but now they're like, Republicans are like trying to look over here, gas prices, look over here, food prices, and it might work, it might not. We're gonna find out in 2 weeks, but I don't know. I mean, I just feel like it's not a dog whistle anymore. A dog whistle was a nice, genteel way to talk about this in early 2000s and in the 90s, but now it's not a dog whistle anymore. I mean, basically, it's public discourse. Nobody's hiding anything anymore. I mean, that is one good thing about this time, even though it's a bad thing, is that none of this is hidden anymore. The racism is out in the open. The sexism is out in the open. The plans are out in the open, and this is the other thing I think that everybody misses in the Democratic side. You need to really listen to Republicans because they always tell you what they're going to do. So yesterday, Steve Bannon, who is, invaded jail once again. I don't know how. I would be in jail right now. You know this, right? Because I'm a black woman. I would be in the jail right now. But, he is basically saying, we're going to have, we're going to get rid of all this stuff. We're going to be trying folks. We're going to be doing this. I mean, he's laying the plan out. And the Democrats are like, who woo, And the rest of us are like, are you paying attention to what's happening here? Some of y'all getting ready to go to the gulag. Trump told you the other day he wants to jail journalists so that they'll get raped. I mean, dude is off the chain right now. He is saying everything that is right on top of his head. That's some really heinous stuff. This is the kind of stuff that you would hear in Russia. This kind of stuff you would hear in North Korea. You would hear it in North Korea, they'd just do it.
Yeah.
China would just put you in jail and just expect these things happening. But Trump is saying it out loud. And everybody's just like, oh.
Well, Trump says that he has chemistry with North Korea.
Of course he does. Because he's a dictator.
With Kim. So I have a question. This is my last question.
Who knows?
That's funny. This is this is my last question. But this, I'm going to state the person and I'm going to ask you to tell me why, whether they're racist or not, given just evidence. You don't know anybody's heart, right? None of us know hearts, but we know behavior.
Hey, but can I say one thing about that? This is how I know you're evangelical. Like, we don't know anybody's hearts. You know what? Screw that language. That's the problem with y'all. You always like, we don't know their heart. So this is why people like Gerson could say, I didn't know the Republicans were racist. Go ahead.
Well, so anyway, I hear you on that. But this is kind of a representative of white evangelicalism. And so this would help us understand to look for these kinds of things in other areas with other leaders. So Jerry Falwell. Make the case for why he.
Well, we're talking senior, right? We're talking about the dead man. Yes. Not
the party guy.
Not the party guy. I mean, Jerry Falwell was basically for apartheid. Okay, let's not forget that this was the man who said you should buy some more Krugerrands and was supporting South Africa in the 80s when my former colleague was chaining herself to the doors of the South African embassy. And why am I just blanking this morning? It's because it's early. Forgive me. But she's in the history department at Penn. She's emeritus now. But, this is really interesting that you ask about Jerry Falwell Sr. because Jerry Falwell Sr., 65 ministers and marches, said ministers should not be out here. It was a direct sermon against what happened in the Selma March. Okay. So that's been Jerry Falwell's kind of MO. But like everybody else, he realized you can't talk about racism in the same way. So, the language starts to change. But clearly racist, okay? Clearly has some thoughts about stuff. But also pragmatic because, when you get to Jerry Falwell Jr., and I'll give a little plug for something here at the end, basically they realize that they need Black students to make Liberty, a powerhouse, not just in athletics, but to try to deny all the racism and everything else. So Jerry Sr., yeah, racist. And we don't know. I mean, I just talked to somebody the other day. We will just leave this off the table, but another historian about how they have all of, Jerry Falwell Sr.'s, lots of his sermons are locked up and you can't get them. Why can't you get them? Probably because he says a lot of racial stuff. And these are earlier sermons, like from the 60s and early 70s and all that. Some of the later stuff is out, but you can't get some of that early stuff from the archive. So I think that's really interesting. But I want to give a plug, and I'll normally do this on podcasts, but if you really want to, kind of see where all of that work that Jerry Falwell Sr. did to get liberty where it is, you should watch the new special on Hulu, God Forbid, because I'm in it, A, and B, it's going to be talking about Jerry Falwell Jr.'s relationship with Giancarlo Granda and his wife, and how liberty kind of ended up in this middle space. Because I think what we don't talk about, and this is going to be something I think historians pick up a lot, Donald Trump might be president because he had some stuff on Jerry Falwell Jr. And I think that's a really big story to tell, because basically, Ted Cruz had come through there, and made a big splash. But when Trump came through and was welcomed and backed by Jerry Falwell Jr., that opened the floodgates for him in terms of people thinking about him as a viable candidate. And so we don't talk about that very much, but I think part of that has to do with blackmail.
Yeah, I mean, Trump probably has stuff on everybody. I mean, especially
that's what I think too. I mean, this is why Lindsey Graham doesn't want to testify down in Georgia.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, Jeffrey Epstein had stuff on everybody. Look what happened to him.
Well, yeah, but they had to get rid of her, and look what happened to what's her name. She's in jail. I mean, every day she's probably hoping that nobody's going to whack her or something, and probably has a food taster. But I'm just saying, these are issues that we need to bring up when we're talking about all of this. You can't just think that these are standalone things. They are all related to something else.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, Dr. Butler, we want to be really sensitive with your time. I feel like we could just carry on this conversation for much longer.
We'll have to do it again. We'll have to have you on again if we do it.
But thank you so much. What are you working on now? Any books coming out? Anything
I'm just trying to get through the midterm elections, folks. I mean, Christian nationalism is a big business, and what I can say, though, is that one thing I can say is that the book next year will probably be in paperback, and there'll be a chapter that kind of brings us a little bit closer up to date. So look for that.
Okay, will do. And thanks again, Dr. Butler. We really appreciate your time. Your I don't know, we appreciate everything about you. So thank you for spending some time with us.
Your intelligence, and just thanks so much.
Yeah, and to our viewers and listeners, we will see you all next week. Take care. Bye.
Bye.